Hi, I'm Marc, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics of the European Union. The heads of state and government of the EU member states have promised Ukraine to take tougher action against Russia. The European Union is determined to increase collective pressure on Russia, according to a statement adopted at the EU summit on Thursday. This also includes possible further sanctions and work on the already existing price cap for Russian petroleum products. Most recently, countries such as Poland and Lithuania, among others, had called for the upper price limit to be lowered in order to further cut Russia's income from oil exports. At the same time, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his colleagues promised Ukraine further political, economic, military, financial and humanitarian aid for as long as it's necessary. The number of asylum applications in the EU has risen again. At the same time, according to a survey, many citizens here do not see Germany in a position to take in more refugees. Last year, 881,200 initial applications were made in the 27 EU member states, as reported by the EU statistics authority Eurostat on Thursday in Luxembourg. Compared to the previous year, this means an increase of 64%. At that time, there were 537,400 applications. However, the authority also pointed out that the number was more than 1 million during the large displacement movement in 2015 and 2016, so it was much higher then. In addition, the EU states granted more than 4.3 million people from Ukraine protection from the Russian war of aggression. They do not have to apply for asylum. The war has been going on since February last year. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen wants to join international forces to find the Ukrainian children kidnapped by Russia. We want to exert international pressure together to take all possible measures to determine the whereabouts of the children, said von der Leyen on Thursday at the EU summit in Brussels. Among other things, she would like to work with United Nations organizations and organize a conference. We know of 16,200 deported children, of whom only 300 have returned so far. Von der Leyen spoke of a cruel memory of the darkest times in our history and described the kidnapping of the children as a war crime. The arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin is therefore fully justified. According to consumer advocates, planned rules on green advertising promises should apply to all products. The EU Commission wants to present a law against so-called greenwashing this week, and this should enable consumers, for example, to better recognize whether a product that is marketed in a climate-friendly manner is actually less harmful to the climate and the environment or not. According to the Commission, the new rules should give consumers reliable information about the sustainability of products. This is not about mandatory information, but about voluntary statements by companies about products and organizations. According to a 2020 study by the agency, more than half of the claims made about the climate friendliness of goods were vague or misleading or unfounded. The EU has imposed sanctions on other people responsible for the brutal crackdown on anti-government protests in Iran. According to a decision by the foreign ministers of the member states on Monday, these include several clergymen and judges, as well as the Supreme Council of the Cultural Revolution. According to the EU, the latter has funded various projects which undermine the freedom of girls and women by imposing restrictions on their clothing and education. According to the EU official journal, the Council is responsible for the preparation and formulation of political plans in the areas of science, education, religion and research. It is said to have discriminated against minorities, such as the Baha'i religious groups, with its decisions. The dry and warm winter is already leading to drought in southern and western Europe. The effects are already visible in France, Spain and northern Italy, according to a report by the European Commission presented on Monday. This is noticeable, for example, in the water levels of the rivers or the soil moisture. This was accompanied by concerns about water supply, energy production, and agriculture. And today, unfortunately, we heard of the first forest fire in Spain in 23. In addition, it snowed significantly less than average in the Alps. According to the report, the snowmelt, which otherwise causes the rivers to swell in spring and early summer, will therefore be significantly less. The southern and eastern Mediterranean are also said to be experiencing warmer and drier conditions than usual. According to the will of the EU Commission, the European Gas Emergency Plan is to be extended by 1 year. We have made good progress in diversifying supply and reducing our dependence on Russia, said Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson in Brussels on Monday. But global gas markets are likely to remain tight in the coming months. A further reduction in gas demand will ensure preparation for next winter. In addition, the goal of filling the gas storage tanks to 90% by November 1st will be easier to achieve. Simpson counts on the support of the member states there. The gas emergency plan came into force last August against the background of a possible stop in Russian gas supplies and was originally intended to last until the end of March. It provides that all EU countries voluntarily reduce their gas consumption by 15% compared to the average consumption of the past 5 years. The European Commission wants to support Turkey with €1 billion for the reconstruction of the country after the earthquake disaster 6 weeks ago. This was announced by EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Monday at a donor conference in Brussels. The German politician announced another package worth €108 million for humanitarian and initial reconstruction aid in Syria. The EU member states want to supply Ukraine with 1 million new artillery shells for the fight against Russia in the next 12 months. This was confirmed by several diplomats to the German press agency on Monday on the sidelines of a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels. The price of European natural gas continues to fall. On Monday, the market price fell below the €40 per megawatt hour mark for the first time since mid-2021. The trend-setting future contract TTF for delivery in 1 month fell to €39.65 in the morning. This is the lowest level since July 21. Natural gas prices rose sharply last year because of Russia's war against Ukraine. At the peak, prices of more than €300 were paid after natural gas had cost around €20 per megawatt hour for a long time. A high dependency on Russian gas had led to an energy crisis. In view of the emergency takeover of Credit Suisse, the banking supervisors of the European Union have emphasized the stability of the banking market. The European banking sector is resilient and has solid levels of capital and liquidity, as the European Central Bank, the ECB, the European Banking Resolution Fund, the SRB, and the European Banking Authority, the EBA, said in a joint statement on Monday. The comprehensive measures taken by the Swiss authorities to ensure financial stability are to be welcomed, they say. Doctors Without Borders warns that the free trade agreement negotiations between the EU and India will make it more difficult for poorer countries to access generic drugs. There is a risk that Indian manufacturers will only be allowed to copy original medicines from pharmaceutical companies in the EU after a longer period than is currently the case, said Doctors Without Borders expert for access to medicines Melissa Chavez to the German press agency. This danger opens up due to a published draft of the free trade agreement, she said. When asked, the EU Commission stated that the EU's free trade agreement did not prevent the delivery of medicines. If the EU and its trading partners opened their markets to each other, intellectual property rules would have to be fair, balanced, and transparent. And this includes regulations for the pharmaceutical sector, which are necessary so that there are incentives for innovation. With the so-called right to repair and stricter rules for green advertising, the EU Commission wants to strengthen the consumers. The environment should also benefit from the projects about one I talked already. On Wednesday, the authority in Brussels presented those two corresponding legislative proposals. The EU Parliament had already demanded a right to repair almost 2 years ago. This is intended to inform consumers about the cost of spare parts when making a purchase and also whether a device can be repaired. Smartphones, coffee machines, and printers should be thrown away less often than it's the case now. With the law against so-called greenwashing I mentioned earlier, consumers should also be protected. And this concludes this week's report on the politics of the EU. The next report on another topic is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.